welcome back everyone. So, last week I left you with some super basic videos, and I paid for that with miserable attendance. You know, the 2 unboxing videos. I thought they were okay, but not sure people liked them all that much. Anyway, live and learn. This week, however, I think we're going to cover something that many of you are going to be very, very interested in. This week I'm going to talk about the best settings for shooting with the Nikon Zf for nature photographers. All 3 groups I can think of are going to want to watch this video. Landscape, macro, and wildlife photographers, take note, because what I'm about to tell you will make your life smoother, easier, and far less of a hassle. I think it's important to talk about why the proper settings for how you work is crucial. First of all, I think the obvious is worth stating. If you can't find the setting you need and you're in front of what you're trying to shoot, that can be very, very bad. It can lead to missed opportunities, crushed self-esteem, and at best a lost photograph. Why risk these things when you could have just the setting you need in front of you all along? So let's talk about the settings I use to get you started on your journey to a customized camera that will make your life a dream for photography. All right, let's talk about those menus. You like my reading glasses? They're pretty cool, aren't they? All right, a little goofy looking, but I like it. I think it works. Let's start with the I menu. You'll see we have 12 banks here, and in those 12 banks, you can put 12 things that come from any menu on the camera, which is nice. So, the left 6, I tend to group because you will use those settings to switch the camera from landscape to wildlife shooting, or macro shooting, or what have you. These will be your basic settings for shutter, release mode, etc., etc. So let's go through these real fast. All right, first thing you're going to have, the top left, is the focus mode, and that will let you select between autofocus single, autofocus continue, or even manual focus. And truthfully, a lot of us use lenses and don't have a manual focus switch, so it's handy for that. And when you're shooting wildlife, you definitely want to switch to AFC. So it's pretty clear why that's important. All right, release mode. So this is where you select if you want to have a single frame that it fires off, low speed continuous, which is like 5 frames a second, well, adjustable, I think, from 3 to 7 frames a second. High speed continuous, which is, I think, 11 frames a second, 10, 11, something like that. High speed extended continuous, and that is actually 15, one of those 2 frames a second. And then C30, which shoots nothing but JPEGs that are lower quality at 30 frames a second. So it's sort of like shooting video, but higher dynamic range. And then, of course, your self-timer, which we use in landscape all the time because we don't want the camera to shake. We set 2-second timer, fire off the shutter, take our hands away, and it fires off 2 seconds later. You can adjust that by going into, with using the wheel, your self-timer delay, and that gives you 2, 5, 10, and 20 seconds. And then you can even adjust how many shots it takes. So if you're bracketing and you know you want to do 3 shots, you can say self-timer 2 seconds, fire off 3 shots. Or even if you're not bracketing, it'll fire off shots in sequence. All right, the next one is ISO sensitivity. That's pretty self-explanatory. You set, your ISO, what have you, and then if you use your front wheel again, it will allow you to set your ISO auto on and off, and then you can set your maximum sensitivity on auto. All right, the next one is image area. That is where you go in and you can select full frame, FX is what full frame is called. You can select DX, which is APS-C. You can select 1:1, which is basically square crop on a full frame. You can do 16:9, which is like HD video crop on full frame. It won't scale it down. It'll be on full frame, but it'll be the crop for those sizes. All right. Next one is one I use, and you can change it to something that you feel like is more useful to you. I use this slot for time-lapse video because I use the intervalometer. I like to set up a time-lapse, to catch clouds going by. You know how they go by slowly, and you set the time. You set the intervalometer to make an animation or a video of it going by fast. So what this does is allow you to set the intervalometer, which is the amount of shots over a certain amount of time, with spacing in between, obviously, and then it will assemble it into the movie for you with exposure smoothing and all that, which I find invaluable. If you're just using the intervalometer, which we'll actually talk about in a second, that just saves all the frames to your card, and then you have to assemble them yourself in your photo program into the movie. I prefer making a movie the other way. Let's see. This is your open one. So I have something random set here. I don't know why I have it set to this. I'm sure I was doing something. But you can set this to anything you want. And this would be great for, you know, if you want to set your intervalometer there, or if you want to put, here, let me go into real fast. Oops. Let me go. Okay, so I've come into the settings menu, but this is great for setting things like custom control shooting or shutter type, release mode, any of those things we've already set somewhere else, but something that you may need. So if you regularly use airplane mode, you can put the airplane mode switch on it. If you regularly change your tone, you can put tone mode on it. Anything you want can go on there out of these menus. As you see, I've put it in tone mode now, SDR or HDR, HLG, whatever, same thing. All right, so that is your open slot. You can set that to anything you want to put in there. I mean, you can set any of the, it's funny I'm saying it that way, because you can set anything here to be anything you want it to be. But if we're going by my menu structure, that is your open button. All right, next one, we're back over into that 6 bank, which are the major settings to change if you're going between wildlife and landscape. So AF area mode. What this allows you to select is, I generally for landscape work keep it in point mode, but you can go to wide, small, wide, large, which are really good for wildlife shooting because it gives you a box that you can put over top of your subject. Or wide C1 or wide C2, which one's vertical and one's horizontal, and you can adjust the width of the box so that just whatever's inside of that box. And this can be handy if you're shooting, vertical videos and you need to just focus on what's inside of the center of the image for your vertical video. And then, of course, there's the auto mode, which uses the whole frame and it tries to figure out what you want to have in focus. So generally whatever's closest to the front, or if it's tracking, looking for eyes, it's in subject detection, I should say. It will find like the face in there and then lock onto that inside of the entire frame. It's kind of handy. And in here you also set subject detection options. So we're talking auto here, humans, so for portrait work, animals. I know it's a cat, but it's animals. The Japanese love cats. Cars, so for auto racing, what have you. Airplane, for people who love air shows, I'm guessing. But I usually keep it in auto, unless I'm out shooting birds, and then sometimes I put it on, just animal, because that way it doesn't try to pull human faces out of trees. It's really funny. You can be shooting over top of a forest, and it'll suddenly start seeing human faces in the forest. So that can happen, believe it or not. It's very weird. All right, image quality. This is another thing you'll change, because if you are banging out thousands of images, you may not want to record RAW. So you can go in there, and what I have it set to right now is RAW plus JPEG in fine mode, so it's the high quality JPEG. But you can change it RAW regular, RAW basic, JPEG, or, just so you have a JPEG backup. Or you can just switch it over to just shooting JPEG. Or just shooting RAW. I like combination because I like to have a backup. I do highest quality JPEG with highest quality RAW. That way if something happens to the RAW file, I have the JPEG file to back it up. All right, back out of here. Silent mode. So this is great for turning off the shutter sound, basically turning it into electronic shutter mode, which is also good for wildlife, unless it's insanely fast moving wildlife, then you might get some bending in your shot. But silent shutter is really handy when shooting wildlife, and it can also allow you to maintain a higher frame rate because it's not smacking the shutter up and down. So silent shutter is good. Oh, and it turns the beeping off too. silent mode, sorry. Focus shift shooting. So what this does, I find this very handy in landscape work. You shoot an image of something, but part of the image is out of focus, like your subject. So let's say you're shooting a car for kicks here. Say you're shooting a car. You want to get the headlights sharp, but you also want to get the taillights sharp, and the car is pointed at you. So you can use this tool to go in, and it will take a I can't talk today. It will take a predetermined amount of shots at intervals through the frame. So it'll focus on the lights, shoot that. It'll focus on the fender, shoot that. Driver's area, shoot that. And, you know, whatever. As many as you want, up to, God, I think you can shoot an insane amount. 999 shots. So you're talking like little slices of in focus, which can be really handy for getting everything sharp. I tend to just use it for, you know, in a landscape where I want to have the rocks in the foreground really sharp and the trees in the background really sharp. You set it up 5 shots or whatever from front to back, and then you take it back to your software and you combine it and you make a focus stacked image, as they call it, and then everything is sharp in the image. It's really quite nice to make an image sharp that isn't possible to be sharp in, you know, terms of normal physics with a camera. Yes, it's a little fake, but, you know, we want things to be sharp front to back. That's why we use it. All right, auto bracketing. So when you're in a situation where, like, for example, a sunrise, and that sunrise is lighting up the clouds, lighting up the sky, but it's, you know, early in the morning, so your ground area is very dark. So you'll bracket it. And what bracketing does is it allows you to set, I primarily use it this way. You can set exposure or flash or white balance, or all these different things can be bracketed. I just use it for exposure. And you set it to exposure, you set it to 3 frames as I have it set here, 1 stop between frames, so it's going to do 1 stop underexposed, 1 stop overexposed, and then perfectly what it thinks is perfectly exposed. And then you can take all 3 of those shots, take them to your software package, combine them together to make an image where you can see what's in the shadows, you can see what's in the highlights, and it just looks well balanced and proper. This can be overdone. I mean, people, HDR images, yeah, you may have heard the term HDR. HDR photography makes me sick, honestly. I use this as a tool, not as an artistic statement. Let's put it that way. Nothing wrong with the artistic statement, it's just not my taste. All right, and then the last one in this menu is custom controls. And this has to be in here, in my opinion, because you want to set the buttons on your camera, and you may want to do that while you're out in the field. You want to be able to say, oh God, I need to have this thing on this button while I'm shooting this subject. Sort of like wildlife, you want to have, in wildlife, you may want to have something that, you know, turns your autofocus off suddenly because you're trying to shoot something at a distance, etc. So this is really handy. So let me tell you what I have for settings on this. My first setting is, you know, I can't see it. It's because I took these off and I need to put them back on. My first setting is the function button on the front, and I always keep that at grid. That's really handy for me because when I'm composing, sometimes I want to use a grid to try to see how I'm really laying things out in the image. So the grid can be really handy. The second button I change is the AEL-AFL button. That's autofocus lock, auto exposure lock. I don't use that. So I turn it into the autofocus on button when I'm shooting just general photography. Or if I'm shooting with manual focus lenses, manual everything lenses, but manual focus primarily, I set that to peaking. So you can come in here and find peaking on the list. Oh, I'm not even going to do this right now, but you can do focus peaking on it. And when you tap it, it goes into focus peaking, so you can use that focus peaking to get it sharp, and then tap it again and turns off the focus peaking, and then you can compose. Play button, I always leave play because I want to see what I've been shooting. So, you know, you turn that off, you can't see your images. Display button, I like to go through what's happening on my display, so I don't get rid of that. So the OK button is the other one I use when I'm shooting manual focus. I'll use the OK button as I call it, a punch in button. I mentioned this in a past video, which basically zooms in. So you can set it to zoom on off, And you can set it to 50, 100, or 200% magnification. And what this does is you tap zoom and you tap peaking. So those two buttons I just told you how to define. And that'll allow you to zoom way in, focus, and focus peaking will tell you what's sharp. Then you can turn off focus peaking. You can zoom back out just by tapping that button again, and then you can compose. Really, really handy item. But really, like I said, it's really only in the way I work for shooting manual focus lenses. So most of the time I keep it on reset, and what reset does is it resets the focus point back to the center of the image, which is really handy because when you're shooting landscape, you move your focus point around to tell it what you want to focus on, but then you set up for another shoot, another image altogether. You want to hit that OK button to recenter your focus point and then go from there. So that's why I keep that there. Let's see. So these are lens buttons. I don't really use these, but I was thinking about how I would use them. So like this is lens function 2. Some lenses have a second function button. So this is the 24-70 2.8. It only has one function button, and that one function button, I'll tell you how I play with that in a second. But on a lens that has the second function button, you can use that for pretty much anything. So in wildlife photography, you might use it for changing view mode. And what view mode does is it allows you to have the view of the entire sensor on the whole screen, or it shrinks it down and then all your data sits around it in a smaller screen. You know, it might be handy. But I don't really use that button. But I did decide that this is a useful button. So this is the first function button on the lens, LFN1. And what I put on that is the FX-DX switch. So if you're shooting wildlife or you're shooting landscape and you can't switch out lenses because you're shooting something that needs to be handled pretty quickly, you tap that and it'll switch it to DX and you've zoomed in more. So this 70 then becomes 105 millimeters. Sure, you get a crop on the image, but in a pinch, it works. Or in wildlife shooting, you hit that LFN1 and you get a DX crop on your image. So now you're shooting even zoomed in even more. So your 400 millimeter lens is now a 600 millimeter lens. That's really, really handy. All right. I feel like I'm dragging on here, so let me keep moving. Oh, the last button that I keep what they have it set on initially is the movie record button. This is for photography, of course. So you go to the movie record button, and I keep it set to the live view info display off because I like to compose on the back of the screen with no data. And in the viewfinder for that matter. I don't want to see anything save for the focus point. And when you hit that button, the live view info display off, it kills all of that data and just shows you what your sensor's seeing. That way you can compose without any distractions. That to me was the one thing on the Nikon Zf that drove me the most mad. On the Z7 drove me the most mad was that I could not turn that extra data off no matter what I did. I could look through the viewfinder and select a display mode that, you know, had a minimum amount of things, but it always had stuff there, and I really wanted to get rid of everything. And as I told you in a past video, the D850 you could even get rid of all the data on live view, so never understood why on the Z7 they crippled it like that so you couldn't get rid of all the data on the screen. But they fixed it on the Z7 too, so oops. I think we're okay, there we go. All right, so that is my basic settings for the buttons. And having that button menu on the I menu is super handy because you can then change those buttons really quickly. All right, one more thing before we're done with this long, protracted video. We're going to go out here and go into this menu. This is called the My menu. So there are other settings on the camera that I don't use all the time, but I would really like to have someplace where I can access them without having to dig. And digging through menus when you're under pressure can be absolutely infuriating. So being able to go in, find what you need, it's not something you use all the time, so yes, you still have to go into this menu, but it saves you so much time and aggravation. So let me tell you what I keep in mind. As you see, it's down here on the left side of the screen. Don't know what I'm pointing at, but on here you see, you normally come into the menu in your photo shooting menu by default. What you really, to get to the My menu, you go to the very bottom menu on the left side. So what I've put in here, first thing, is customize my I menu. See, then I can come in here and start changing things up. If I don't like what's on any of these buttons, I can fairly quickly go in and just change it. So at the beginning of a shoot, like I said, these two slots right here, I keep pretty much as the slots I change to anything. So if I have something that I'm going to be using on a shoot, I can put it into one of these, a setting that I'm going to be using regularly on a shoot. I'll put it into one of these slots. And see, then you can come in here and you can change it to whatever you want it to be. So let's say focus tracking with lock on. I mean, that's kind of handy. So you want to have that in a place where you can turn it on, especially for wildlife shooting. And then in this second one over here, you may want to put it to, I don't know why you'd use this, but here, you want to turn your active D lighting on because you're no good in Photoshop and you just want to use active D. I find active D to be useless, but whatever. Anyway, so those two slots you can customize in there, and like I said, it doesn't really matter what I think. You can turn any one of these buttons into anything you want them to be. This is just a good starting point that I've put together. All right. Second one I put in the My menu is grid type, because I'm not always using that 3x3 grid. Sometimes I want to visualize a 4x4 so I can really break down the grid and see what I can put in different spots on that grid that I didn't see, without a grid. Or if I'm shooting vertically and I want to shoot a 4x5 or even horizontally, but I want to crop to 4x5 in the end, and I know I do, I can set that grid to be actually a 4x5 outline so I know exactly where that outline is. So when I get back to my photo editing suite, I can just put the crop on it and I know it's going to be correct. 1:1 gives square, same reason. And 16:9, same thing. Like 16:9 I use to shoot thumbnails for YouTube because that way I know exactly what's going to be in the thumbnail. Because there's a line that shows you exactly what's inside that section of the image. Very handy. All right. Number 3, Starlight View. Starlight View is absolutely super handy. And for those of you landscape photographers that are shooting astro, and some would argue astro is separate from landscape, but let's just keep it there for the sake of this argument. Starlight View allows you to see in the dark. Absolute dark, no. But it allows you to see in very, very, very low light. So when you're setting up a shot and you have trees in it and you have a sky in it and it's nighttime, if there's any amount of light at all, Starlight View will see it and you can compose with that. And it is really, really good. I really like Starlight View. So I keep it in this menu because I don't use it all the time, but when I'm out shooting astro at night, I want to get to that setting, I can turn it on quickly and I don't have to dig for it. My fourth one's interval timer shooting. If you recall, here, we'll go back out of here and I'll go back to I menu. I use time-lapse video shooting in the I menu because that allows me to set up a quick intervalometer-driven video shooting. So it shoots the intervalometer stuff and puts it together and makes a video for me. So I don't have to deal with it. That's nice, but sometimes I do want to deal with it. Sometimes I'm shooting something that I know I'm going to want to go into Lightroom and apply some settings to it before I assemble it into a video. And that's where this comes in handy. Interval timer shooting is just the intervalometer. So you set all your settings and it writes everything to the disk, all the different files, and then it doesn't assemble it. You can do that later yourself. All right, enough said about that. I'm running on here about a lot of this stuff. The next one I keep in here is non-CPU lens data. If you're shooting manual focus, manual lenses, you need this data so that your IBIS, your in-body image stabilization, will stabilize a lens that has no electronics. So like a 50 millimeter Nikon, like one of the ones I had in my adaptation video, you tell it you're 50 millimeters and you tell it that it's a 1.8, let's say. Well, or here, this is the one we're looking at, is the Konica, the 28 millimeter 3.5. Now it knows that it's a 28 millimeter, so it can adjust the IBIS so that it'll stabilize a 28 millimeter frame. And I put in that it's a 3.5. And what that does is it tells the camera that 3.5 is where the widest aperture. So now when you look at your metadata, you at least know which lens it came from. You may not know what the exact aperture was, but you know which lens it came from, 28, 3.5. All right, enough rambling about that. Non-CPU lens data is fantastic, and you can have, I think, 10? No, oh my gosh. How many? 20. You can have 20 different lenses entered in here. Very handy. And the next one I keep on this lens or on this menu is vibration reduction. There are times when you want to turn it off. Sometimes it'll get confused in certain situations, and you just want to turn it off. There, it's easy to find here. You didn't have to dig for it. All right, and secondary slot function. Sometimes I don't just want to have overflow onto the second card. Sometimes I want to have, if I'm shooting images, I want to have a backup. So shoot the image here, shoot the image here. You know, keep it in both spots. Or I want to put RAW on the main card, JPEG on the second card. When I get home, I import all the RAWs. If they're all fine, there's no problems with them, I can just go delete the JPEGs later. Handy, handy. Usually I just use it as overflow though. Just me. Next thing on this menu, on the My menu, airplane mode. This is handy because it saves your battery. You turn off all of the radios, like the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth. Those get turned off in airplane mode, just like your phone. It saves your battery. And then I keep connect a smart device on here too, because I do a lot of shooting of myself. Or, you know, it allows you to use your phone with SnapBridge to photograph whatever you want to photograph. But I use it here in the studio with SnapBridge to photograph myself because I'm a one-man show. So you can add many other items, like pretty much anything in any of the menus you can put in here. And that's really, 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 really handy. As you can see, you can go in here, custom menus. You can pick anything from any one of these and have it be on the list. So the My menu is crucial for the things that you can't put on buttons and the things you can't put into the 12 boxes. Things you don't use all the time, but you still want to have access to. It's really important to use the My menu. All right. I really ran on there, and God, I'm so worried it's just going to be confusing. We'll see when I go to start editing. But I think in the end, getting this camera set up correctly, here you can see I have the camera set up. I've got a recorder on top of it as I'm, so I can't just fling the ZF around while I'm talking to you. It's important to get your camera set up correctly for the way you work. Everybody works differently. What I'm giving you as a layout for setup is not necessarily what's going to work best for everyone. At the end of this, I'm going to do a quick little wildlife thing so I can show you how I switch back and forth. Actually, let's just do it. All right, the last thing I want to show you is how I use the I menu to switch me back and forth if I'm going landscape shooting and then I want to shoot some wildlife, because that frequently happens. I was out at the shore, where was I? Beach last week, and I saw some birds and I just wanted to photograph them. I threw on the 100 to 400 and I had to be able to switch settings really quickly so that I could shoot wildlife instead of landscape, because landscape's got a bunch of settings and it's, you know, it isn't going to work for wildlife. The 2-second timer, all the different things you want to change. So let's go in here real quick and I'll explain how this works for me. So as I said to you, I keep the crucial settings in the left 6. That way I can pop into here and, all right, let's go ahead and set it up real quick for landscape work. All right, this all looks, all right, now we're in landscape setting. Oh my God, there's a bird. I want to shoot the bird. What do I do? All right, pop in here real fast. I want this continuous. I want this to be high speed. I want this to be auto. So boom, auto on. I want this to be silent. I want this, we can just leave that, that's fine. And I want this to be, oh, what are we gonna use? Oh, I didn't even talk about the high speed settings. We can do that in a minute. I want this to be this, and I want this to be animals. All right, now we're set up for wildlife. It's pretty simple. Not as simple as user settings, but they didn't put user settings on this camera. But by setting it up this way, within 20 seconds, I basically changed the camera from a landscape camera to a wildlife camera. So that's imperative. And let's say I need to go back to what I was doing. I just come back, reverse the settings real quick. Off, off, boom, and, well, that's fine. It went back to what I wanted. So, there you have it. Very quick to switch between the two. And that's why I put those 6 settings on the left side of the menu like I did. All the other stuff, you know, when you're shooting wildlife, you will want to do this sometimes. Oops. You will want to switch between FX and DX, like I said, to get a zoom. That's fine. But really, these 6 together over here are the things that allow you to switch quickly to wildlife or back to landscape. Under one of these other buttons, you could actually, I think you can, I don't know if you can put the starlight under these buttons, but I don't think you can. That's why I put the starlight in the other menu. Because I was like, it'd be nice to have the starlight in here, but I don't think you're able to put it in. It's, for some reason, locked out of this particular menu. They did that with some settings, which I don't fully understand, but that's okay. All right. I hope this helps you understand the importance of menus and getting your camera set up the way you need it to be for the way you shoot. Because when we're out shooting, we're frequently given very little time to try to figure out what settings we need for what we're looking at. And sometimes when you're under pressure and you see this thing you're excited about, you won't be able to find anything you're looking for. So having those settings in an easy to access menu in a way that you've memorized and is just second nature, so you can change that setting really quick and get working, that's important. And so I hope these settings that I've showed you today are a good start for you. I don't want to say that you have to use this way of setting it up, but maybe this will shed some light on how to set up a camera in a way that makes the camera work for you, so you're not working to try to use the camera. Anyway, I've really, if you got this far, I appreciate that you were here. I hope these settings help you out. I hope you get the shots you want to get and that these settings helped you get those shots, because, man, there's nothing worse than trying to dig for something when you need it. And that's one of the things with digital cameras. There's so many settings. And sure, you can understand what all the settings do, but you can't memorize. I mean, you could, I guess, but memorizing where every single setting is, that's a hassle. It's much better to get it set up in a way that when you need it, you know exactly where it is and you can turn it on and off quick. All right, that said, thank you guys for coming out. If this was useful at all, won't you hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and I went from monetized to non-monetized, so I can't get you this week yet to click something. But I'm going to put one of these buy me a coffee things at the bottom at some point. So if you want to buy me a coffee in the future, please. I appreciate it. I'm working hard on these. So anyway, I appreciate you guys so much, and I hope you'll come back next week. And yeah, the Z8 videos, by the way, are coming soon. I will tell you, I liked it. I liked it more than I thought I was going to. A lot more than I thought I was going to. So I went into it trying to be like, nah. But I liked it. Anyway, thank you guys so much. I'll see you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.